Hey guys, welcome back. In the previous video, I showed you how I installed an automatic reticulation system to water some hypothetical lawns and gardens that I have planned. So in this video, I'm continuing with my garden setup by assembling a shed in the corner of my backyard. This will not only free up some valuable garage space, but will also be a good base for future projects that I want to complete. Let's get into it. So this gap in the retaining wall is approximately 2.6 metres, and I've chosen to build a concrete pad that goes all the way back to the edge of our alfresco paving, which is about 4.3 metres. In total, the concrete pad I'm planning is about 11 metres squared. I set up a string line to help me dig the right dimensions for the concrete. I want the pad to be 100mm thick, so I needed to dig quite a lot of the sand away. It's pretty hard to see in the daylight, but I set up a laser level and then I can use my tape measure to gauge the depth. And we're using a handheld tamper to pack the sand hard and level at the base. For the concrete framework, I was pretty lucky to have 3 sides covered by retaining and the pavers. So for the lawn side, we used a long piece of wood and some stakes.
Yeah, that's right there, yeah. That's right there. Towards the Yep. That's soft.
It took some time to get it level and perpendicular to the walls, but we got there in the end. I also put in 2 conduit sweeps to come up in the middle of the concrete and out under the pad. I might never need these, but it's better safe than sorry. At this point, I worked out that I would need something like 120 bags of cement and would have to hire a mixer to pour the concrete. So instead, I got some pros in to do this part. These guys knew exactly what they were doing and did the job in a handful of hours. I feel like I would have been here for days messing this up, so I'm glad I went this route. Sweet, so after letting this cure for a week or so, I could remove the framework. Now let's talk about sheds. I originally purchased this shed kit from Absco called the Premier Garden Shed in a size that would fit on the slab we poured. I had a terrible time with this shed. It took nearly 4 weeks for the shed kit to show up, and this optional extra, the cyclone kit, took something like 40 business days. Even worse, the shed was missing a couple of pieces to complete the door framing. We got pretty far with assembly before we figured out we had missing parts, but I was left with a partially assembled projectile in my backyard for weeks while I played patient customer. And when the cyclone kit did show up, it was for a different shed altogether.
This is the wrong one. The wrong kit.
Also, it was just flimsy and shit quality. Disheartened and with around 4 months lost, I ended up taking it all back to Bunnings. I got my money back and instead I purchased this shed from Stratco. This is the Handi-Highlander in gunmetal grey. It's almost 3 times the price, but look, you get what you pay for. This showed up on the exact day and time they told me it would, and it had every part. Already a much better experience. The shed was fairly simple for a novice to put together with decent instructions. There were very minimal cuts to make. In fact, the only ones I really had to make were for the corner uprights because I had chosen to attach it to the concrete slab rather than cement these pieces into the ground. Basically, we assembled the gable end framing first, which just slots together with the aid of a rubber mallet. Then I could start attaching the pre-cut pieces of colour bond to it with the provided screws. All the pieces are labelled, which makes it pretty easy to figure out which ones to screw on, and I just used a string line to help line up the screws for a more professional finish. Well, end of the first day. Didn't get too far, but the gable ends are built. issue is it gets quite windy in the backyard here, so I can't really stand them up or leave them anywhere, and I don't have really that much space unless I want to work on the sand. So yeah, that'll do for the moment until I can get a bit more help, and then I'll put the rest of the frame together and can start building the walls and stuff too. The next day I gathered some helpers and we attached the two gable ends together with the horizontal framework. There was also the ridge beam at the apex of the roof. These pieces held the ends together fairly well, but it was only when we started screwing the wall panels on that the shear strength increased massively. Like seriously, just 1 or 2 panels and it was already so much more rigid. Once we had enough panels on to hold it square, and before it got too heavy, we shifted it into place on the pad. Next I used a 10mm masonry drill bit to install some anchors through the mounting brackets and into the concrete pad. With all 4 corners screwed down, this thing's starting to look really good. I'm missing a little bit of footage, but we installed the door frames and put the rest of the side panels on. The door frames also have some brackets that get bolted down to the slab. The roof was the next thing to go on, and I found it easiest to do the one side off a ladder from inside the shed.
Found this is enough, just being able to lift that, slide the sheet on from here. Puts a couple of little scratches on this, but I think there's a ridge cap that goes over the top anyway, so it doesn't matter. Right, that's halfway on the roof. Not too bad in the end. Got my lines like fairly straight. It's kind of like a little bit that way, but yeah, not too bad overall. I think it's just maybe the squareness of the walls in general, which is pretty hard to do when it gets heavy, so, but yeah, not too bad. I think the gutters, like this part here, is still loose, so I see it lifting up. Pretty sure you're supposed to be able to just slot the gutters underneath and just lift them as they go, so I'll yeah, leave that till the end. All I've screwed it on is this ridge beam at the top along here for now, so yeah, I'll keep going.
Didn't take me too long to put the roof on the other side. It had much easier access to slide the panels on. Nice and closed in. Still see a little bit of air gaps and stuff, but I've got end caps to put on and like another ridge beam sort of colourblind cover as well. And then yeah, roof should be fully sealed. Gonna call it quits there for now. I've still got the gutters and that to do on both sides, but at least yeah, the roof's on. It's all looking pretty good, and the door is done. I had a lot of trouble with the hinges in here. Just the screws they supplied with it, they kind of, you know, they don't actually sink in, so basically when the door closes, each of these are touching one another and kind of sandwiching together. It's making this slight flex of it. And anyway, I found some other bolts, and yeah, they're a little long, but at least they've done the job, and they're much stronger than these tech screws going in. That's sort of the handle set up there. Pretty crude, but yeah, so see what I mean? There's a little bit of tension just on the door there, and it's actually pretty hard to see, but I think it's because those are pushing together. This doesn't seem to be a nicer way to do it, but either way, when you close it, it sits fairly flush, so that's not too bad. And yeah, all looks pretty good.